You may have walked past her again this morning, the advisor who stayed 20 minutes after a shift ended, not because you asked her to, but because a customer needed clarity on a repair and she just wasn't going to go and leave them hanging. You may not have noticed, you walked past that tech who pulled a new hire aside during lunch and walked him through the entire diagnostic process, not for credit, not for recognition, and definitely not for hours, but because he remembered what it felt like to be totally lost in week two. You didn't notice that one either. And you walk past that salesperson who de-escalated a situation on the floor that would have ended in a manager page, handled it all herself, and never mentioned it. Three modes, three emerging leaders, and you missed all of them. Not because you don't care, but because you were looking at the wrong scoreboard. So many of us do. And today, I'm going to show you the 5 signals of emerging leaders that so many managers miss because they're just too busy measuring production to notice character. And that's where your emerging leaders live. 7 minutes, one truth, one execution move. If you're a leader who's tired of promoting the loudest voice in the room instead of the wisest, tired of discovering someone's leadership potential only after they left for a competitor, and tired of looking at your bench and seeing no one who's ready to step up, you're in the right place. I'm Chris Hunsicker, and this is the Dealership War Room. This isn't motivation. This isn't theory. This is a daily leadership briefing for people who actually have to produce results in the arena, at home, and at work. You're in the war room. Here's the mistake so many managers make when they're looking for future leaders. They look at the board, top producer, highest units, best numbers, and they promote that person. Because in automotive retail, like so many other businesses, production is the scoreboard. Everyone watches. And the assumption is if they can sell, they can lead. If they can write service, they can manage the lane. If they produce results, then they'll produce results through others, right? They'll just teach them to do what they do. That assumption has created more failed managers than any other decision in our industry because production and leadership are completely different skills. The best salesperson might make the worst manager that you've ever hired because selling requires individual excellence. Leading requires the ability to make others excellent. And those are not the same thing. So if the scoreboard isn't where you find emerging leaders, then where do you look? I'm going to suggest you look for 5 signals, and most of them are invisible on a spreadsheet, but they are very real. Signal 1, ownership without authority. This is the person who takes responsibilities for things and processes that they weren't even asked to own. The advisor who notices that the waiting area is messy and just cleans it. No asking. Not their job. Nobody invited them. They just saw a gap and filled it. The salesperson who follows up with a service customer they overheard having a bad experience, not because it was assigned, but because they care about the customer experience beyond their own lane for the whole store. When someone takes ownership of things that they have no obligation to own, you're looking at a leader because leadership at its core is voluntary responsibility. And people who do it before they have the title are 10 times more likely to do it after they get the title. Signal 2, character under pressure. We spent all last week on pressure. And here's what I want you to watch for in your people, right? As it relates to pressure. When the month goes sideways, who stays steady, not the one who works the hardest, not the one who logs the most hours, who keeps their composure, who stays calm, who doesn't gossip, who doesn't blame, who shows up the same Tuesday of a great month as they do on Tuesday of a disaster. Because that consistency, it's a single most reliable predictor of leadership capacity. Because the person who can manage their own state under pressure will eventually be able to manage everyone else's. Look for the person who doesn't change when the weather changes. That is your leader. Signal 3, natural coaching instincts. Just watch your sales floor for the person who teaches without being asked. The tech who shows the new hire how to use the scan tool patiently without making them feel stupid. That advisor in your lane who pulls a colleague aside after a tough customer and says, hey, walk me through what just happened. Not managing, not correcting, coaching. Naturally and without a title, without permission, without a framework. They're already doing what you spent 5 episodes learning in the coaching arc, and they're doing it on instinct. When someone coaches without being asked, they don't need to be taught how to lead. They need to be given the opportunity to lead. Signal 4, hunger for growth. This is the person who asks questions that nobody else asks. Hey, Why do we do it this way? And what's the outcome we're trying to achieve? Not as a challenge, as genuine curiosity. What can I do to get better at this? Not because you prompted them, they prompted themselves. They read on their own. They listen to podcasts, maybe even this one. They ask for feedback instead of waiting for it. And they want to improve, not because someone is watching, but because growth is part of their identity. Remember in episode 290, the 5-minute rule? The person already has one. They're already investing in themselves. You can't install a hunger for growth in someone who doesn't already have it. They got it or they don't. But when you see it, feed it, because that hunger is the engine that makes every other signal sustainable. You found a leader. Signal 5, and this is critical, emotional intelligence. This is the subtlest signal and the most important. Watch for the person who reads the room, who adjusts their approach based on who they're talking to, who knows when to push and kind of when to back off, who can have a difficult conversation and still leave the other person feeling respected, even when the message was hard or difficult. This is the warmth and standards from episode 302 happening naturally in someone who was never taught the matrix. They just have it. The ability to hold high expectations and deep empathy at the same time. Emotional intelligence can be developed, but the person who already shows it without training, that's someone you can build around because there's a foundation there, because they will absolutely be able to connect with people in ways that no process or system can ever replicate, because it's a person-to-person connection. Here's today's execution move, and I call this the leadership scan. This week, I'm just going to invite you to watch your team through a different lens, not the production lens, the leadership lens. Every day, for a moment that reveals one of the 5 signals: ownership without authority, character under pressure, a natural coaching, a hunger for growth, and emotional intelligence. And then write it down, the person's name and the moment that you witnessed, the signal it revealed. By Friday, you'll have a list of people you've been walking past for months that can now be part of your developmental things. Heck, you may have been walking past them for years, and they've been leading without a title. And one of them might be your next person to develop, not because of their numbers, but because of who they are when nobody is keeping score. And if you know a manager, someone in your circle that you care about deeply, who keeps promoting the wrong people, the top producer who can't lead, send them this episode, because the best leaders on their team might be the ones they've never noticed. Elite leaders don't just look at the board. They look at the person. Ownership, character, coaching instinct, hunger, emotional intelligence, the 5 signals that are hiding in plain sight. And the leader who learns to see them stops losing their best people to competitors who noticed it first. That's the kind of leader that you're becoming. And tomorrow, I'm going to show you the conversation that turns potential into trajectory. The moment you tell someone, I see a leader in you, and then back it up with a plan. So today, go out, create some leadership fire. I'll see you tomorrow in the dealership war room.